Hi.
Hi. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, good. Nice to see you.
Do you see your mama there?
Yeah, hi, Mom.
Hi, Karen.
So,
We
yeah.
are Rebecca. I'm Rebecca. This is Jennifer from Daily Wonder, and we're here as part of our Parent Ed series, and we meet weekly at this time to bring you different subjects and topics about kids and learning.
That's right.
So today's topic is literacy.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so we're going to just take a look at how Daily Wonder approaches this topic. And really, we kind of, our large perspective is that we follow almost like human development over time. Where we start with the oral learning of vocabulary, language, and kind of like the tone and culture that's hidden within the language.
Mm-hmm.
And then just like human beings took that oral tradition and started to build images, like little pictorial images. We take the children and through that same process.
Right.
And then in history following that, human beings started to use symbols followed by letters. So symbols like hieroglyphics, followed by letters of our common alphabets that we use across the globe. So in our Daily Wonder approach, we do the same thing. We kind of follow that historical human development because children develop similarly as human beings developed over time. So in like the early years, kindergarten, preschool-y kind of age, the focus is on the oral tradition. So lots of verses and singing and stories. And then by the time they start grade 1, it's this kind of formal introduction to literacy, the literacy program at Daily Wonder.
That's right. So I guess I should just interrupt and clarify, like in our ideal Daily Wonder vision, families prior to joining us in grade 1 can just enjoy an oral tradition through songs, poems, and stories and feel like confident that they're doing all the steps for literacy for that age group.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, there's a lot of pressure in our culture, I think, for kids to learn to read immediately upon coming out of the birth canal. But we know that children get, if the environment is such that they get lots of vocabulary and stories read to them, and stories told to them, and songs and verses and things, they're going to unfold as they naturally would, and they're going to learn to read just as they learn to walk without being shown a tutorial, just as they learn to speak. Right? It's all it'll come out as it should.
That's right. And I think Rebecca and I have a place we're heading with this IG, but like things are coming up as we're talking, and I feel like it's stuff like this that's worth sharing that adds more confidence to parents, because with our 20 years of teaching in the classroom, we can confidently say that there's a very wide spectrum of when a child begins to read. Like, yes, some children just absorb it in kindergarten because you've put books in front of them and they want to read so badly, but we feel grade 1 perfect time to introduce it in this rich way that Rebecca is describing. But I've had students in grade 4 who are 10 and 11 click with reading then, and as long as you've become aware that there aren't any major red flags, and that happens through assessments we've talked about and things like that. Like if you see things unfolding, natural milestones, then you really can rest easy that your child will read when the time is right. And it's a beautiful thing because reading is very abstract. You're taking, like Rebecca said, like an oral tradition is being reduced to these abstract symbols, these black and these lines and sticks. So it's a different type of thinking that's required. So on a positive level, if your child doesn't read fully until grade 4, they have a very different imaginative, creative brain working that is a benefit on so many levels. And when it becomes a more abstract thinking brain, the reading is, the brain can take on reading.
Yeah. And if we can feel confident in waiting and letting things unfold as they should, then you're guaranteed almost that your child is going to feel confident. They're going to feel joyful towards reading. Sometimes when we push things on our kids, it can have the opposite effect, right? And we want to avoid that.
Exactly.
So let's talk about what we offer, what we do, Jen.
Mm-hmm.
And we can start in grade 1. We talked a little bit about how the kids, before they get into the grade school, the focus should be on the storytelling and the verses and the singing, so that the children are kind of picking up in their atmosphere the language and the stories embedded in the language.
Mm-hmm.
So then we hit grade 1, and it's kind of like this turn into the child kind of awakens in a developmental way anyway. So we take this moment to put some more formal kind of literacy work in there. So we take that next step of finding the images in the landscape around the children and pulling the letters from out of those images. And I'll give you a couple of examples, like having the mountains before us and finding that shape of the M hidden in the mountains, and bringing the sound of the misty mountains and telling a story with the misty mountains, and drawing out that image of the mountains, and then drawing out the image of the M. So it's kind of this process of discovery and uncovering the mysteries of the sounds and letters in what's living. So then these imaginative pictures really speak to the children. And the next part of the process is to begin to write those letters that come from the stories and the images that they've drawn. Mm-hmm. Writing those letters, and then, that following a few years, building sentences and words and things out of those. So the first step is to write the language. Then once we know what we've written, we can read it. And then from there, we kind of dissect it with these phonics rules. Mm-hmm. And in Daily Wonder, we have a 3-year literacy program that over those 3 years, there's something like 33 rules, and they're kind of divided up evenly among grades 1, 2, and 3. And they're just, what is the role of the silent E? What are the digraphs like SH and CH and TH, and how do they work, and what are the rules? So it's kind of building a little bit of a friendship with some of these complex rules mm-hmm. through games and activities and things like that. And it unfolds over the 3 years. And if you're joining Daily Wonder in the 2nd year and you missed the whole 1st year, it really doesn't matter, because they're always at play. Those things are always at play. So mm-hmm. ideally, you get the whole 3 years, but it's okay to step in at any point mm-hmm. and just pick up wherever you are. And then from there, you can talk about how it goes, into it's more and more sophisticated as you go through the grades mm-hmm. from this foundation.
I'm just going to add one piece that makes me also think, like, sometimes a family joins Daily Wonder and their child is already reading, but we've also found that it's kind of like if you've learned math, or you've learned a blind trick with something, and then you suddenly learn the actual real function of what's happening with some rote math you've learned. That can be the same with this ability to take on the alphabet. So if your child's reading, but you go back and bring out the beauty of every single letter through nature, your child will, revisit and relearn the alphabet with the wonder that they possibly didn't get the first time around. So it's still really beautifully important.
Yeah, and I'll add on top of that, we encourage every parent to take up cursive writing. We talk about it a lot. And we say that as soon as your child knows the letters and sounds, you can take this up. So for us, that means grade 2. So if you're joining and your child already knows how to read and they're relearning the letters, maybe you add this layer of complexity by bringing in the cursive at that point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Like, there's a lot of flexibility to work with where your child is at. Mm-hmm. So maybe if for grade 3, you would say you kind of end off with beginning sentence structure, like how to compose, basic sentences in your curriculum. And then for grade 4, so you've got this foundation that the children have been building for these first 3 years. In grade 4, we ask you to bring out a junior dictionary and a thesaurus, and to start to investigate more thoroughly what it takes to create a proper sentence. What are the rules of punctuation? What are the grammar rules? So in beautifully integrated artistic lessons, we pull out, lessons on the parts of speech through games and activities. We use Norse mythology and the Great World Tree to illustrate root words that live at the bottom and prefixes and suffixes that would be in the leaves and piecing together words. So the children are learning in grade 5 a lot of Greek history and mythology. So learning, you know, the origin of a lot of our English words that come from Greek, or in grade 6, learning the origin of our words that come from Latin. So really filling out a lot of understanding of the English language. So we work with building up really healthy writing skills around paragraph writing in grade 4 and 5, so that the first essays and reports are starting to be written. And it's a process of doing, you know, so if your child is not a great writer, that just means a process of patience and time, you know, like if the content suggests a paragraph and your child is writing 1 or 2 sentences and you're working with proofreading and editing, they're just learning all these skills because it's repetition. So at first, the parent is often going through and proofreading and editing and helping them see what words are commonly misspelled, or if they're always forgetting a capital instead of, you know, at the beginning of a sentence. These are all basic rules that just get repeated over and over and build and build and build until your child is writing, you know, a 5 or 6 paragraph essay or report or science inquiry, animal report. All these things start to happen over the grades. There are sometimes particular grammar lessons that need to come at a certain time, and Daily Wonder will put those into the content, like learning subject and predicate, learning the subjunctive mood. Yeah, so we always say to parents, like, trust that all the important things are being covered, and the practice is embedded in the guidance every day between reading, independent reading, writing skills, editing, proofing. And then it's recommended every so often, you know, if you see your child commonly misspelling certain words, or you feel there's an area that they kind of need to tighten up on, feel free to, you know, write some spelling words out and bring them out once a week, or put them around the house for them to practice. But we feel that, you know, a lot of this just comes with time and practice, and you have 7 years of Daily Wonder curriculum to build. And when Rebecca mentions looking at rules, like what's with the silent E, that'll come back in grade 4, you know, revisiting spelling rules and seeing again, oh, so what happens when I add ED? What are the rules for that? Or when do I add what consonants? What's happening with the consonants when I add ing? Revisiting syllables. And then I think one of the biggest pieces is this oral recitation that we love in Daily Wonder. And your children are memorizing just exquisite poetry and religious texts and things like that as they study different religions and cultures. And so the rich vocabulary that they're getting just adds so much to their own oral abilities and then their writing abilities. So we really come from the oral and the writing and the reading and come from every angle.
I was reading something in my preparation for this live, and I just read a quote that stuck with me about when you're reading or telling stories to very young children, you know, 5, 6, 7-year-olds, to remember to not dumb it down and to use that rich vocabulary, because even if it's not a word that a 6-year-old would use, the feeling for the word is going to just sink in there, and the sounds of that word and how it would feel in the mouth. And so important to build the vocabulary in this kind of just auditory oral way.
It reminds me, when we brought that up, it reminds me of like my daughter in grade 1 or something, or kindergarten, telling me a story about friends at school that had quarreled. And it's like, you just knew she heard that word in a story, and that was the choice of words that she used. You know, that just happens all the time with our students.
Right.
Yeah.
That's really funny. Yeah, it's fun to think that somebody could go and write a report about, you know, the creation of something complex in grade 7, and it's all based on finding the M in the mountain in grade 1, right?
Right.
Beautiful, peaceful journey from this, you know, this evolution of human literacy over time mimicked in the child from grade 1 to 7. It's beautiful.
That's right. So from that to writing, you know, Greek odes and limericks and all these like hexameter poems. So all of this is embedded in the curriculum. And I think one of our biggest reasons for doing this topic is so that parents can just rest easy that if they begin the journey, the things are going to get covered that need to get covered, and they don't have to keep supplementing with other things, and just trust this long, beautiful process.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see if there's any questions there that need to be answered. You answered the question about worksheets. You know, they can be fun if there's something that your child is really engaged in, a process, or maybe they're really struggling to understand a specific phonics rule or grammar issue. Then you can certainly find a worksheet online. But we feel like we've included all the practice that you're going to need in the Daily Wonder lesson plans.
Yeah.
Anything
like so much of it comes from like we want your child to do first and then have the concept come into the brain. So if they're writing and you can highlight, oh, here's, you know, this piece that that this is a mistake or this is something that needs to be corrected, and then understand why. Like learning the apostrophe, like when to use the ownership apostrophe, like there will be some, you know, worksheets or little practice things embedded into those lessons. But you just don't have to get a grammar book and like be going through it daily. Oh, good. Okay, Karen, do you encourage whole language or phonetics or a combination, Rebecca?
I think a combination is where we sit between whole language and phonetics.
Yeah, I think like in the way we were originally trained, we were trained kind of whole language. And then over time, we've realized as teachers, and then it's also kind of developed a more thorough foundation of like incorporating phonetics and coming from both angles.
Well, and also we recognize that like Jen and I come from our teacher training was based in a teacher training from a different language. And so some people spent some of their time sort of translating the meaning of our philosophy into English language, which requires the phonetic layer. It's a very challenging language to learn. So the phonetics just helps characterize the language in a way. And so so every learning English requires decoding, like it requires sounding out. And there's ways to do that, you know, where the beginning stage of sounding out is onset and rhyme, it's called, where you would use just the first letter and recognize the first sound and then group the rest of the letters together for a second sound. So that's kind of the starting place, which moves to creating syllables and sounding out syllables in groups. So it's, you know, there's lots of different ways to do it. This is the way that Daily Wonder describes it in the lesson plans. And all the instructions and the support is listed in there. Yeah.
That's good. And it's all inspired by this amazing foundation that we've just put into practice for all this time, like foundations of literacy.
Any other questions? Let's see. Yeah, I mean, reading stories to your children is a great way to bring in the vocabulary and to encourage that oral tradition where somebody is able to sit and listen to a story. It's also a real challenge for parents, a positive challenge to be able to tell a story. And so we've said it before that you can tell the same story for a month. You can tell the exact same story, and then you start to remember the story. Your child starts to remember the story, and then your child can take over telling the story. This is a huge learning piece for your child to be able to take over the entire language of a story and tell it to you with the intonation and the pauses and the, you know, the voices or whatever parts are in your story. So that's a great way to share that oral tradition as well. And the capacities that you're building in your child while they listen it's huge.
And that kind of reminds me that, you know, going from that in the early years to, let's say, grade 4, learning Norse mythology and hearing these myths that just live so deeply in the child. And then the activity is that they take a favorite scene from one of the stories and rewrite it as a monologue or a dialogue and put on a little mini play at home, and then just live into the oral tradition again, and then again practicing all these features of oral language. So you get your drama and you get your tone and your pace and your gestures and all these things, and you're learning plot and character and setting. So everything's woven and integrated into these lessons and in these artistic ways.
Absolutely. It's nice of you all to join us today. Next week, we're going to talk science.
Yeah, we'll tell you Daily Wonder's approach to science.
That's right.
So thanks for joining. We'll see you later.
See you later.
Bye, Mom. See ya.